All right, so given these two vectors, so we got vector u, which is 1 plus j, and vector v, which is negative 1 plus j. So we want to find the dot product of these two vectors. We want to find the angle between the vectors, and then determine if these vectors are going to be parallel, orthogonal, or neither. Okay. So let's just do a couple background things here, right? Hopefully at this point you know how to find the dot product, so we'll do that. Okay. So how do you find the angle between two vectors? We need to use this formula. The cosine of theta is equal to the dot product, right? So the dot product divided by the product of their magnitudes. Okay. So we're going to have to do a couple calculations here, right? So in order to find the angle between two vectors, we have to find the dot product divided by the product of these respective magnitudes. But notice, it's equal to cosine of theta, right? So then cosine of theta is going to equal to whatever this number is, okay? And then we should be able to determine theta. Right? Now just a quick note here, okay? If cosine of theta is equal to 0, then what does that mean? Right? If cosine of theta is equal to 0, that means that theta is 90 degrees, right? Okay. Think about what that means, right? So if we work out this problem here, right? Fill everything out, and then we get 0 on this side, right? So if cosine of theta is equal to 0, then we know that the angle is 90 degrees, which means what? Right? That means that the vectors are orthogonal, right? Remember, orthogonal also means perpendicular. So essentially, if the dot product is 0, right? If the dot product is 0, then the vectors are orthogonal. Remember, orthogonal also means perpendicular, right? So you don't necessarily need to complete the problem here, right? But once the dot product is 0, then boom, you're done, right? You know that these two vectors are going to be perpendicular. Okay. Now, what does it mean for vectors to be parallel, right? For vectors to be parallel, that's going to occur if cosine of theta is equal to 1 or negative 1, right? Because then in that case, the angle is going to be 0 degrees, right? Or 180 degrees. Okay, so the angle between these two vectors are either 0 or 180. So then that means, then in this case, right, the vectors are parallel. Now, just a little note here, right? It doesn't mean that the dot product is equal to 1, right? It means this whole right side, right? This whole quantity is equal to 1 or negative 1, okay? And then any other case, then it's neither, right? It's neither parallel nor orthogonal, okay? All right, so then let's go back to the problem, right? So let's just find the dot product, okay? So u dot v in this case, okay? So we're going to multiply the respective components here. So 1, okay, so we got 1 times negative 1 plus 1 times 1, which does give us 0, right? So the dot product of these two vectors is 0, so what can we conclude? Right? So we could go ahead and plug everything back into this formula here, right? And, essentially we would have to find the magnitude of each of these two vectors, right? But notice what we get, right? We get 0. Right? It doesn't matter what the denominator is because the numerator is just equal to 0. So, since the dot product is 0 here, what can we conclude? If cosine of theta is equal to 0, then, right, theta must be 90 degrees. And what can we conclude then? If the angle between them is 90 degrees, then these two vectors are going to be orthogonal, right? They do cross at a 90-degree angle.